I'm recording this because, well, I'm not sure and I am sure where I am all at the same time. It's a bit of a weird feeling. But, as ever, I should start at the beginning. I have no idea how long I was kept captive on Dr. Vello's ship. I know it was for definitely more than a day, though after that I kinda just lost track. I do know that roughly every few hours or so, his associates would come in and beat the ever-living shit out of me. At first it was for information. Basically, they tried to batter out every bit of information about the day that I blew up half the earth and also went back in time through that crack. They didn't ask about anything particularly personal, but as I said, that's what they did at first. However, quickly afterwards, they just come every day just to beat the shit out of me for fun. I wonder if I'll be able to actually feel, well, any pain in my face ever again. I probably will. They also rip the fur off me, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They would just grab chunks of it in their hand and just pull. I know now that if anyone else happens to have the unfortunate of being held captive in that cell, that they'll have my blood on the floor to, well, keep them occupied with something to stare at. They never bothered cleaning it, they just left it there. Eventually it dried. On one of the occasions I was knocked out and woke up in a pool of it. Unfortunately, the blood had started to dry, and, well, it's drying on my face, and I was a bit stuck to the floor. It was like they were pulling all over again as I ripped myself up. I reckon that if Dr. Vello hadn't finished preparing whatever work he was doing, and finally got back to needing me, then I would most likely be dead. And I'm not talking about from the Omicron virus, which, by the way, didn't help the situation at all. And I'll be honest, I was ready to die. Then, I just wanted them just to beam me up one more time and to just finish the job. I don't feel like that now, but, well, in situations like that, despite everything, if you're tortured and, well, it's beaten up relentlessly, death is normally the one thing that just goes through your head. Anything for that sweet relief of the pain. But anyway, at some point I was finally brought to see Dr. Vello. To be honest, he didn't even seem shocked or even notice the fact that I had dried and even fresh blood all over me, and the fact that I physically had to be held up as I no longer had the strength to stand up on my own accord. He was fully occupied with his work. Nothing else seemed to matter to him. All work and nothing else. I imagine it was probably boring for the men who worked for him, which is probably why they got their kicks out of kicking the shit out of me, just to avoid the sheer boredom, I reckon. But anyway, Dr. Vell started talking about things. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention. I was only semi-conscious. Mainly for the fact that I'd lost quite a lot of blood. But there were some words that I definitely heard and could make out. That he was getting ready to test his dimension generator, and I was the test subject. I was then dragged forward. I then spotted a familiar device. Dr. Vell had now sort of began to start gleaming with glee as he came over to a particular headpiece. I trust that you recognize this device. It's part of the device that Spax used to extract my blood and DNA to create Scarver. Yes, indeed. But it is also a useful device. Just one of the gifts that he gave to me in order to secure his release. But I thought that I am one of their benefactors. How do you think that they were able to find you so easily? You're the one. There are still traces of your blood, no? It makes an excellent tracker for you. So that's how you were able to find me. You're always able to find me. Unfortunately, ER became a problem for me. They seem to endanger your life, which is why I needed to get rid of them quickly. You were the one who tipped off Spix McKendry, weren't you? And I'm guessing you're the one who chose the agents who would go off on that mission. I assured them that now that you would no longer be trouble for them. You didn't want them to kill me. You've practically done that yourself already. But you are still alive. Barely. If you could even call this life. And besides, I'm dying anyway. You will live long enough for what I need you for. And besides, there may be something in it for you as well. What makes you think I want anything from you? Believe me, if I had the strength, I would. There may be a cure. What? You now are infected with the Omicron virus. Now I know you are searching for a cure. But in an alternate version of this reality, one may already exist. One way you found the cure. Or perhaps it already existed. Is that supposed to make me forget everything like you've done? Not at all. It is supposed to give you motivation and an incentive to cooperate. And if you do, you get the cure, and I will simply let you go. Just like that? Just like that. You can go home to your family. Sorry if I think you're talking bullshit, suppose in my experience. Believe what you like. My only true game goal and interest is in this discovery, and the proof it will bring. Unfortunately, I believe you on that. Secure him. I believe you know how this device works. Despite it being a year, I knew exactly how it worked. He placed it on me, several needles injecting themselves into me. I always wondered why Spax was just willing to just walk away like that. Now I knew why. He knew that I'd be tortured and suffer more than if he'd just simply killed me there and then. Probably the only downside he felt in his mind was that he wouldn't be there to witness my suffering, and it would all be wasted on someone like Dr. Velo who didn't really seem to care. His mind was purely devoted on his scientific discovery. He seemed pretty much devoid of anything else. I would have said he was emotionless, but that wasn't true. There was one thing that did still remain: his hatred and anger. Even during that first short conversation, I could easily sense his anger and bitterness. It seemed to be the only emotion that he'd held on to. I did wonder to myself that if he could open up alternate realities, then maybe he would find one where he discovered it in a much more humane way. Or to put it bluntly, one where he didn't turn out in the same way as the one that I was currently stuck with was. To be honest, I could barely feel the needles go in. I was pretty much numb with the amount of pain I was feeling, and it felt like any second now I would slip out of consciousness. Dr. Velo turned on all of his equipment and, well, to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what he was doing. My eyes began to blink pretty rapidly. I could feel it. Pain in my eyes. They were burning. They felt as if they were going to melt and explode. Each second they were open was pain and agony. I shut them as tight as I possibly could, but Dr. Velo ordered his men to forcefully open them, which they did gladly. My eyes apparently had to be opened since they didn't want to risk me losing consciousness. Why bother? They were going to kill me anyway. Whether it was deliberate or not, it didn't matter. I then heard an explosion happen next to me. Dr. Vell quickly must have dashed over to it. I could hear him fumbling and panicking. I reckoned that the equipment must be failing. I could feel a heating in the room. A fire had started. The two thugs who were being forcefully opening my eyes fled. I could feel the fire slowly reaching me. It was burning red hot. It had managed to catch my jeans and the sleeve of my coat. They were now alight. And with the pain I was feeling, all I could do now is scream. I then shut my eyes. When I opened them again, I took a second to realise I could no longer feel the fire or any pain. I was still looking down at my legs. They were no longer on fire, and I felt wet. It then took a second for me to realise I was outside, somewhere in the rain. I'd been transported there somehow. It must have worked. I was in another dimension. An alternate reality to my own. It seemed that whatever Dr. Vellum was doing had worked, though rather than opening a doorway or teleporting everyone, as presumably he thought, it had only taken me. I slowly prized the headset off my head, though apparently that was all the strength that I had left, as I immediately did a vanishing act where I plummeted to the ground. I was in an alleyway. It smelled of piss, but something else. But before I had time to try and figure out where I was, and, well, think of everything that had just happened and try and think of a way to get back, I fell unconscious. I have no idea how long I lay there. All I know is, by the time I eventually woke up, it had stopped raining. I wondered why no one had spotted me. Taking a quick whiff and a quick glance, I quickly realised why. In front of me was a biffa bin, but that smell again. And the biffa bin? It all made sense where I was. I was down the alleyway of a pub, but not just any pub. One I recognised. I limped out of the alleyway and took a look at the sign. The Black Horse. It had been one of my locals. I was back on Earth. But not just that, in my hometown of Gateshead. At least, I thought it was. But it took me not very long to realise that I had truly travelled to an alternate reality, as I had been to Gateshead before. After I blew up half the Earth, I mean. And the whole place was in ruins and looked pretty desolate. Whereas this just looked completely normal, just like any average day. People walking down the street. Except something I did notice was odd that not all of them were human. Definitely not my Earth. I wondered to myself, had any of that happened? In this reality, had I blown up half of the Earth? Was I able to save it? There was also the thought of, did I even exist here? And if I did, was I still here? Or was I pulled back into my reality? A passerby stopped and took a glance at me. It was an elderly woman. Looked as if she was in her early to mid-60s. She said, "Oh dear me, Poppet. We have had a scruff, haven't we? What's your son gonna think when you come home looking like that? Had too long many to drink last night, did we? Get in a fight. And got bloodshot eyes." I quickly turned to a nearby window to look at my reflection. Whatever had happened, it had turned my eyes a darker colour. They were no longer deep orange, they were now closer to red. Still, though, it did explain the burning pain I'd felt in them before. I wasn't quite sure what to say to this woman, so I decided to say to her, No. I'm doing a short film for some university students where I get beaten up. Just having a break at the minute, but glad to have someone of concern and for my well-being." She laughed for a second, and then said, "You're going to be using that voice as well, are you?" I looked slightly confused for a second, but then realised that I may not have the same natural vocal cords that I have in this reality that I do in my own. The woman then walked off. I realised I would have to get myself cleaned up and quickly to avoid more awkward questions. I would also have to get myself looked at. Luckily, I hadn't been seriously burnt, though I wonder what James would have thought to know that I'd ruined another one of his coats that he'd made for me. Who knows, in this reality I might be wearing one, and I might be able to convince the other mate to swap one with me. Highly doubt it, though it was worth a try, I'd probably say to myself. But where was I? At least for one thing, I knew I existed, and I still knew I existed in at least a half-human, half-scarlet form, with apparently the same abilities, and looked roughly the same. Now all I had to do is find myself. However, first things were first, I couldn't exactly continue going around dressed the way I was, and I would have to get myself cleaned up a bit. I stick out quite enough as a half-human, half-scarver on my own, thank you, but the fact that I was covered head to toe in my own blood, and my clothes were ripped, torn, and even burnt in places, didn't exactly help. However, there was something I was going to need, and that was money. Luck was at hand, however. Since this version of Gateshead looked pretty much exactly the same as I remembered it, I knew exactly where the old wishing well was. And sure enough, it was there in this reality as well. It did have grating round it to try and discourage you from reaching in and grabbing the money. However, the holes were so big it didn't stop you just fitting your hand through it. And it was also shallow enough so that you didn't even have to climb in. I left any copper in there alone. I focused on any silver, apart from 5p's of course, 20s, 50s, and if I was lucky, £1 or even £2 coins. I managed to gather £7.38 out of the few coppers I decided to pick up. I wandered round looking for a charity shop. I was still getting a few odd scares though. I then made a detour back to an alleyway again. Using the reflection of myself in a nearby window, I noticed that some of the blood had washed away in the rain previously. However, some of it had just dried onto my face, which would need a thorough scrubbing with soap and water later on. However, I did need to cover my face. I found on the ground an empty Sainsbury's carrier bag. I put it on, making a few holes for the eyes and the mouth, so I was able to see and breathe through it. I know it wasn't ideal, a distinctive orange colour, though at least people won't be able to discern, or at least think they had discerned, quickly who I was. After all, I didn't want to give other me some awkward questions needing to be answered that I probably couldn't answer. I checked my pockets, and miraculously, my pair of sunglasses was still there. This would then obviously cover my eyes. It was a trick I'd used from the very beginning, whenever I first turned into a half-human, half-scarver. To cover up the eyes, I used my sunglasses. There was then the problem of my hands, obviously. I didn't have any gloves, and I couldn't exactly find any nearby, so I just decided to pull my sleeves over them as best as I possibly could. I now felt ready to walk into a charity shop, hopefully without any awkward questions. I chose a shirt and a pair of trousers. They were bland, basic, but they were also cheap. I thought I would have got questioned or asked something, but it seemed that the typical British way of doing things had prevailed in this reality itself. Mainly that us British do not give a shit about anyone else. We could not care less what other people think or what they're doing. We keep ourselves to ourselves. Because quite frankly, we don't want to know what weird shit you get up to on late nights on the internet. We won't look at yours if you promise not to look at ours. I then snuck back to an alleyway again. I got behind the biffa bin, and as quickly and as discreetly as possible I changed into the clothes from the charity shop, putting my own into the Sainsbury's bag. I did give the clothes a sniff, and they smelt of old people. I imagine they probably hadn't been washed by the previous owner before giving them to this charity shop. And the charity shop certainly wouldn't have washed them anyway. Still, it was an improvement over what I was wearing beforehand. However, before I could go off and find other me, well, alternate me, a police car stopped right in front of me. 2 police officers got out. I looked a bit puzzled and tried to look as innocent as possible, although in turn probably making myself look more guilty of something. I said in the most innocent voice I could, "Is there a problem, officer?" I was then told I was under arrest for public indecency. I guess someone did see me undress, and were very, very quick to report it to the police. I was read my rights. I do not have to say anything, but if it may harm my defence, if I do not mention when questioned, something that I later rely on in court. I was then put back into the police car and driven swiftly to the station. I was again read my rights and was ordered to hand in any possessions that I had at the front desk. Obviously, I didn't exactly have a lot, other than my bag of clothes, these sunglasses, and that was it. I was then placed in a cell, presumably so that they could decide what to do with me and what they were going to fully charge me with officially, and whether I would need to go to court or just pay a fine or something. I sat in that cell on my own for about an hour. Since there was nothing I could do, it did give me time to think. I think it was the first time in a very long time I was able to just sit and have my thoughts and almost be relaxed, as I knew that there was nothing I could do about the situation I was in currently, so I might as well use this time wisely. An officer did come in with a first aid kit when it was reported that I was covered in blood. They did some basic first aid, and they also questioned how I attained those injuries. At first, I just attempted to lie and say that I just got pissed and fell down a flight of stairs. However, the person examining my injuries was clearly no fool, and they noticed how clearly I'd been physically attacked by someone, though it was pointless telling them the truth. They wouldn't have believed me. I wouldn't have believed me. At least I was struggled to, even after everything that's happened to me. For now, though, I was sticking to that story and just keeping my mouth shut. I was then read more rights of what I have the right and not have the right, and same boring, dreary stuff that I'd heard hundreds upon hundreds of times. Still, though, it was nice to finally have my injuries correct, even if it was just basic treatment. Then, half an hour after that, I was told that my fine had been paid, and that I was now free to go. I asked who had paid my bill. The officer just simply stated that they were waiting at the front desk and were very eager to meet me. I was then led back to the front desk. I was then given back my possessions, and then one of the officers pointed out the person who had paid my bill. They had their back to me, presumably on their phone, though the back of their head was thick of blonde fur, with the same cat-like ears as I had, and they were also roughly my height as well. Still with their back to me, not noticing that I was there, I decided to introduce myself. First of all, thank you for paying the charges. I suppose it was probably a bit odd. They probably, realised that I wasn't you, or did they realise realise it's confusing and, trying to explain it as best as I can. I mean, you of all people should know how odd and strange things can get. The person with their back turned to me finally replied, "Yes, I do." I then raised both my eyebrows at the same time. I imagine I probably looked shocked and curious at the same time. This person then turned to face me, confirming what I'd heard. They introduced themselves as Donna Doncaster. "So," I said, "in this reality, I'm a woman."